The conclave chamber erupted into chaos as Teixeiri's suggestion hung in the air. Elder diplomat Fresh, his gelatinous form pulsing with agitation, slammed a tendril against the ancient table. Deathworlders, you would have us contact the humans. His voice modulator struggled to contain his emotion. Their planet has predators in every biome. Their weather systems alone would kill most of us. They evolved drinking water containing hydrogen oxide, for stars' sake. Teixeiri stood her ground, her slender frame nearly translucent under the chamber's harsh light. And that is precisely why they might succeed where we would fail. The Lilani have less than 2 cycles remaining. High Chancellor Noor 7, the eldest of the Mechanid representatives, projected a holographic display of Earth's solar system. We have observed them for 3 of their centuries. Their technological development curve is concerning. The display shifted to show human conflicts throughout history, each more sophisticated than the last. They wage war against themselves continuously, noted Ambassador Quillix of the Fotteran Collective, his skin shifting through spectrums of worried purple. How could we possibly trust them with knowledge of the wider galaxy? Teixeiri activated her personal database, displaying intercepted human transmissions, music, art, literature, and scientific achievements. They also create beauty from chaos. They heal their wounded. They mourn their dead. And most importantly, they protect those weaker than themselves, even at great personal cost. The emergency transmission from Lilan replayed in the background, the sounds of destruction providing a grim soundtrack to their deliberation. The Krell harvester ships had already consumed the eastern continent. Billions of Lilani were already lost. The Krell will not stop with Lilan. Teixeiri continued, her voice steady despite her youth. Their pattern is established. They consume, they multiply, they expand. The Lilani are merely first because of their location in the spiral arm. Chancellor Noor 7's mechanical appendages clicked rhythmically as he processed the probability matrices. There is a 78% chance the Krell will target Fotteran worlds next. The Mechanid Collective would follow within 6 cycles. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The mighty conclave, with its thousands of years of peaceful cooperation, had no defense against the Krell swarm. Their member species had evolved in gentle environments, developing technology to compensate for biological limitations. None had faced evolutionary pressures remotely comparable to Earth's brutal natural selection. Ambassador Quillix's skin settled into a resigned blue. If we contact these humans, what exactly would we be unleashing upon the galaxy? Perhaps the Krell are the lesser threat. Teixeiri's 4-fingered hand swept through the holographic display, showing Earth's night side, billions of lights marking human habitation. They call their homeworld Earth. Their ancient languages named it variations of dirt or soil. They feel no need to glorify the crucible that forged them. They simply survive there. And now thrive. High Chancellor Noor 7's processing lights flashed as he reached a decision. Prepare a transmission to the human authorities. Include only essential information about the Lilani situation and the bare minimum of navigational data. We will request humanitarian assistance only. Teixeiri bowed in acknowledgement, but couldn't resist adding, they may send humanitarian aid, Chancellor, but make no mistake. The humans will come prepared for war. It is their nature. And right now, it may be the Lilani's only hope. As the transmission was encoded and sent toward the Sol system, an uncomfortable thought rippled through the chamber. After millennia of peaceful expansion, the fate of the conclave might rest with a species so dangerous they had been deliberately left uninvited to join galactic civilization. Until now. Chief Engineer Okeffer's dark eyes reflected scrolling calculations as his fingers flew across the holographic interface. We'd need to reconfigure the fold drive manifolds for extended compression. The containment fields would only hold for approximately 72 hours after arrival. Captain Chen nodded, processing the implications. Enough time to assess and engage, but with limited options for retreat. The ship's mess hall had transformed into an impromptu war room, crew members abandoning protocol as the gravity of the situation settled over them. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, the fleet's communications specialist, replayed the alien transmission, isolating fragments of visual data. The architecture suggests a crystalline-based civilization, Dr. Reyes observed. Their biological readings indicate a silicon-based life form with triple helix genetic structures, fascinating adaptations to a low-radiation environment. Chen's eyes never left the tactical display. And their attackers? These Krell. Carbon-based, like us, Reyes said, but with hive characteristics more advanced than anything in Earth's evolutionary history. The closest analog would be Portuguese man-o-war colonies, but with distributed neural networks instead of specialized polyps. Lieutenant Kozlov snorted. So we're fighting jellyfish with a grudge. Jellyfish that build spaceships and coordinate complex invasion strategies, Commander Abasi corrected, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had made him Chen's most trusted officer. The ship's AI chimed in with updated calculations, its neutral voice a stark contrast to the tension in the room. Simulation complete. Recommended loadout for ground forces. Plasma-based weaponry, sonic disruptors, and chemical countermeasures calibrated to carbon-based neural systems. Chen studied the faces of her senior staff. Veterans all, with combat experience from the Mars insurgency and the Europa crisis. They'd faced human enemies, fought in environments from vacuum to methane seas, but never encountered a truly alien intelligence. Admiral Zhao is authorizing this mission with minimal oversight, she said finally. We're on our own once we leave the system, with no guarantee the full drive will get us home. Silence fell across the mess hall. Commander Abasi was the first to speak. The Lilani didn't ask for the Krell to attack them. If our positions were reversed, we would hope someone would answer our call. Dr. Reyes nodded. This is first contact, Captain. Not how any of us imagined it, but history nonetheless. History assumes survivors to record it, Kozlov muttered, though without his usual cynicism. Chen straightened, decision made. Chief Okafor, you have 18 hours to modify the drives. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, download all available xenolinguistic data from the transmission and prepare first contact protocols. Dr. Reyes, I want defensive countermeasures against any biological agents the Krell might deploy. She turned to Commander Abasi. Inform all ship captains. Combat readiness level 1. All personnel recalled from leave. Full loadout of ordnance and extended life support supplies. The room emptied quickly as officers dispersed to their duties. Chen remained, studying the star chart where a small, unremarkable system now glowed with urgent importance. Captain, Kozlov had lingered behind. This galactic conclave has been watching us for centuries without making contact. They're only reaching out now because they need our capacity for violence. Chen's expression remained neutral. Your point, Lieutenant. Just wondering what happens after we save them. Do they welcome us with open arms, or quarantine us back to Sol once the crisis passes? Chen's lips curved into the barest suggestion of a smile. Let's survive first. Then we can discuss humanity's place in a galaxy that's apparently been inhabited all along. As she headed toward the bridge, emergency klaxons began to sound. The fleet preparation sequence was now officially underway. Lieutenant Sarah Kim braced herself against the bulkhead as another tremor shook the UES Dauntless. The fold drive's harmonic resonance had shifted from an eerie hum to a discordant wail that vibrated through her bones. Emergency lighting cast everything in blood-red shadows, transforming familiar faces into spectral masks. Structural integrity at 62%. Reported the ship's systems with algorithmic calm. Outer hull breach on Deck 14. Emergency containment active. In the medical bay, Dr. Hassan worked feverishly, his hands steady despite the ship's violent shuddering. 3 engineers lay on gurneys, their bodies showing signs of spatial distortion sickness, a theoretical condition that had become brutally real when the fleet entered the fold. Their skin rippled as though viewed through heat waves, internal organs temporarily phasing between dimensions. Full transition in 90 seconds. Commander Abasi's voice crackled through the shipwide comm. All personnel to crash positions. Kim fought her way to the navigation console where Ensign Parker struggled to maintain the formation plot. 5 green indicators blinked steadily, half the fleet maintaining position within the fold envelope. 3 yellow indicators showed ships struggling with containment issues. 2 indicators pulsed red. The Resolute and the Challenger are experiencing critical drive fluctuations, Parker reported, her young face glistening with sweat. The fold is fragmenting around them. Captain Chen's voice cut through the chaos with remarkable clarity. All ships, this is Chen. Titan formation. Challenger and Resolute, drop to 30% power and draft behind the Dauntless. We'll extend our field to compensate. Chief Engineer Okafor's protest came immediately through the command channel. Captain, our containment is already at critical limits. Taking on 2 more ships will. Is it possible, Chief? Chen interrupted. A moment of silence. Then, yes, Captain. Technically possible. Incredibly stupid, but possible. Proceed. In engineering, Okafor cursed in 3 languages as he redirected coolant flow from life support reserves to the overtaxed drive system. 2 of his team had already collapsed from radiation exposure, but the remaining engineers worked with grim determination, manually adjusting field parameters that were never designed for human intervention. The algorithms can't handle these variables, Specialist Zhang shouted over the increasing howl of the drives. We need to stabilize the quantum fluctuations manually. Okafor nodded, eyes never leaving the pulsing core. Like playing a violin in a hurricane, redirect auxiliary power from decks 3 through 7. Cut life support to non-essential areas. Throughout the fleet, similar scenes unfolded as humanity's finest pushed experimental technology beyond theoretical limits. The void between normal space clutched at the ships with greedy fingers, reality itself seeming to resist their passage. 30 seconds to transition, Abasi announced. All hands brace for emergence. In the silence of her command chair, Captain Chen watched the structural integrity indicators drop into critical ranges. She had committed 10 ships and over 3,000 lives to this mission, based on a desperate plea from an unknown species. If they survived, they would be the first humans to make official contact with galactic civilization. If they failed, Earth would never know what happened to them. The final seconds ticked down as the fold drive's pitch reached its crescendo. Space-time bent, stretched, and finally tore open before them. The fleet surfed the wavefront of an artificial singularity, riding physics itself to the edge of possibility. Emergence in 3, 2, 1. The universe exploded back into existence around them in a flash of blinding light and a thunderclap of sound as normal physics reasserted itself. Emergency systems shrieked warnings as radiation alarms triggered throughout the ship. Through viewports streaked with ionization patterns, the crew caught their first glimpse of an alien sky and the horror unfolding beneath it. The tactical display rendered the devastation in cold, analytical detail, but nothing could prepare the crew for the visual feed from the scout drones. The crystal cities of the Lilani, structures that seemed to have grown organically from the planet's crust, lay shattered like broken geodes, where the tallest spires had once captured and refracted the light of their binary stars. Now only jagged stumps remained, their inner chambers exposed to the violet sky. Biological signatures detected in the northern continent's subterranean networks, reported Lieutenant Park from the sensor station. Consistent with the Lilani physiological data we received. Approximately 3 million individuals concentrated in 7 locations. Captain Chen nodded grimly. And the original population. The transmission indicated just over 2 billion, Dr. Rice said quietly. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Commander Abasi was the first to speak. Krull concentrations appear heaviest around the equatorial band. Their harvester ships, those organic-looking structures, are systematically processing something from the cities. The Lilani themselves, Kozlov suggested, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. Or their resources. Both, Dr. Rice confirmed, studying spectral analysis from the drones. The crystal structures contain rare minerals and complex organic compounds. The Krell appear to be processing everything, infrastructure, technology, and population, into raw materials. The alien diplomatic vessel approached cautiously, its design unlike anything human engineers had conceived. Asymmetrical curves and biological components integrated with technology in ways that blurred the distinction between grown and built. They're requesting permission to dock, Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez reported. Their translator systems are unusual. They're processing our language through multiple filters. Chen straightened her uniform. Grant permission. Security team to docking bay 3. Dr. Rice, you're with me. Commander Abbasi, you have the bridge. The Conclave representative, Shel Nora, emerged from her shuttle flanked by environmental technicians. Her quadrupedal form moved with fluid grace despite the obvious discomfort of Earth-normal conditions. 4 eyes blinked independently across a broad, flattened face, taking in the human delegation with visible shock. Your species maintains this atmospheric composition voluntarily, she asked through a translator device that rendered her harmonics into staccato English. This is actually optimized for human comfort, Dr. Rice explained. Slightly higher oxygen content than our homeworld. Shel Nora's breathing apparatus adjusted with a soft whine. Fascinating. The Conclave believed your kind could not have evolved naturally. Some theorized genetic engineering by a precursor race. Captain Chen kept her expression neutral despite her surprise. We evolved on Earth over millions of years. No intervention required. The alien diplomat's upper eyes narrowed while her lower ones widened, an expression impossible to interpret. Yet you breathe corrosive gases. Your cellular structure withstands radiation levels that sterilize most worlds. Your gravity tolerance alone should have made spaceflight nearly impossible to achieve. We're full of surprises, Chen replied diplomatically. Now perhaps you can brief us on the current situation. Our long-range scans show the Krell establishing orbital platforms around both moons. Shelenora's translator emitted a sound that might have been a sigh. Those are not platforms. They are converting the moons into incubation spheres. The material harvested from the surface feeds the production of new Krell units. Each moon will birth approximately 30 million combat forms within one standard cycle. Lieutenant Kozlov, who had accompanied the security team, let out a low whistle. 60 million hostiles, and our current count of their ground forces. Approximately 12 million active units. Shel Nora responded, her voice module flattening with what might have been despair. The Conclave's combined military forces total less than 500,000. We are scholars and traders, not warriors. Chen exchanged glances with her officers. Fortunately, she said, we have experience with both roles. The Dauntless's war room fell silent as Marine Commander Jackson finished his proposal. The holographic display rotated slowly, showing 3 insertion points marked in pulsing red against the backdrop of Hillen's shattered landscape. Each target corresponded to a suspected Krell command node, the biological equivalent of a battlefield headquarters. We drop in teams of 12, Jackson continued, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic glow. Fast and quiet, using the crystal formations for cover. The Krell seem to have limited awareness of their peripheral units, which suggests their command structure is hierarchical rather than truly distributed. Shel Nora's translator emitted a series of clicks that might have indicated disbelief. You cannot be serious. Even with your remarkable physiological advantages, you would be sending your warriors to certain death. Dr. Rice adjusted the display to show the neural disruptor compound's molecular structure. The command nodes appear to use pheromone signatures for network synchronization. Our compound should create what you might call a sensory feedback loop, essentially causing the Krell to receive contradictory commands. Commander Abbasi studied the tactical overlay with practiced eyes. The The compound needs to be deployed simultaneously at all 3 locations to prevent the network from adapting. Precisely, Rise nodded. And it must be delivered directly into the node's sensory apparatus. No remote deployment option exists given the Krell's biological countermeasures. Captain Chen watched Shell Nora's reaction carefully. The alien diplomat's 4 eyes blinked in different patterns, perhaps an indication of intense processing. "You've already manufactured this compound," she observed. "You were preparing for combat before we even made contact." "We received a distress call," Chen replied evenly. "Earth protocol is to prepare for worst-case scenarios. And to hope for the best," added Dr. Rice with a gentle smile that did nothing to ease the alien's obvious discomfort. Lieutenant Kozlov expanded the tactical display to show the orbital situation. "While the Marine teams create chaos on the ground, we'll launch a coordinated strike against their primary harvester ships. Even a temporary disruption of their processing operations could buy the Lilani resistance valuable time. Your 10 ships against their fleet." Shell Nora's translator couldn't quite capture the incredulity in her harmonic speech. "The Krell command vessels alone outmass your entire fleet by a factor of 20. "Mass isn't everything," Chief Engineer Okafor interjected, his hand still bandaged from radiation burns sustained during the full transition. "Our targeting systems are designed to identify and exploit structural weaknesses. Size just makes them easier to hit." A notification flashed across the display. A transmission from the Lilani resistance. The crystalline beings had managed to establish a secure communication channel through what remained of their planetary network. Their leader, Elder Zephyx, appeared as a translucent hologram, his fractured body held together by what appeared to be temporary crystal grafts. "Humans of Earth," his translated voice resonated with formal dignity despite his condition. "We have received word of your arrival from Conclave representatives. While we welcome any assistance, we cannot in good conscience accept sacrifice without full disclosure." The hologram shifted to display a biological schematic of the Krell's primary combat forms. The Krell adapt rapidly to conventional weapons. They consume genetic material from defeated enemies, incorporating useful traits into subsequent generations. They have already begun displaying characteristics of our crystalline physiology. Commander Jackson exchanged glances with his Marine unit leaders. "You're saying they evolved during battle?" "Not precisely," Elder Zephyx clarified. "They reconfigure. The process requires resources and time, but each engagement makes them stronger against similar tactics." Captain Chen nodded slowly, a grim smile forming. "Then we'll just have to ensure our tactics are never similar. Humans specialize in unpredictability. Elder Zephyx, it's perhaps our greatest evolutionary advantage." Sergeant Kelly ducked behind a fractured crystal column as energy pulses scorched the air where she'd stood moments before. Her combat HUD flickered with environmental warnings. The atmosphere near the Krell hive structures contained elevated levels of mutagenic spores and corrosive compounds. Nothing immediately lethal to humans, but the conclave species would have perished within minutes of exposure. "Echo Team, Citrip," she subvocalized through her neural link. 2 clicks from primary objective, came Corporal Diaz's steady response. "Heavy resistance at checkpoint Delta." Rodriguez took a hit, but her suit sealed the wound. "We're advancing." Kelly signaled to her remaining squad members, Martins and Wu, to flank the approaching Krell patrol. The aliens moved with unsettling coordination, their chidnous limbs in perfect sync as they swept the ruins with sensory appendages. Her team had already discovered conventional weapons had limited effect against their armored exoskeletons, but targeted strikes to joint connections created catastrophic failures in their mobility. "Hold position," she ordered as her scanner detected a new signature approaching. "Heavy unit incoming." The ground trembled as a massive Krell form rounded the crystalline spire. Standing nearly 5 meters tall, its bulbous central mass pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, multiple limbs, some ending in weapon-like structures, others in sensory clusters, extended from its armored thorax. "Command, we've got a new morphology here," Kelly transmitted, her helmet cam capturing detailed footage. "Appears to be a specialized command unit." Aboard the Dauntless, Dr. Rice studied the incoming feed with growing concern. "That's not in any of the Conclave databases. The Krell are adapting faster than predicted." Captain Chen nodded to Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez. "Relay to all ground teams. Observe and avoid these units until we have more data." Too late. Kelly's feed showed the massive Krell suddenly freezing in place, its sensory appendages quivering as it oriented directly toward her hidden position. "It can detect our communications," Kelly realized, switching to hand signals. Martins and Wu immediately cut their active systems, reverting to passive sensors only. The creature emitted a subsonic pulse that vibrated through the crystal ruins and resonated painfully in the Marines' bones despite their protective gear. Within seconds, smaller Krell units began converging on their position from all directions. "So much for stealth," Kelly muttered, unsheathing her vibroblade. Switching to Contingency Plan Bravo. Commander Jackson watched with growing tension as similar scenarios unfolded at all three insertion points. The Krell were learning, adapting their tactics with each encounter. What had begun as precisely choreographed infiltration missions had devolved into chaotic firefights. "The Marines need backup," he stated flatly, already reaching for his combat gear. Captain Chen raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting deploy the second wave immediately," Jackson confirmed. "Drop pods directly to the Marines' positions. The Krell are tracking our communications and movement patterns, but they're still responding to each team individually." Shelnora's translator struggled to keep up with her agitated harmonics. "You would send more of your people into a failing operation." Commander Abasi studied the tactical display, understanding dawning in his eyes. "It's not failing. It's evolving." Indeed, across the battlefield, the human teams had abandoned their original coordinated approach, each squad improvising new tactics based on local conditions. Sergeant Kelly's team had discovered the crystalline structures could be strategically collapsed to trap or crush Krell units. Echo Team had found that the planet's natural electromagnetic fields could be amplified to temporarily disrupt the Krell's neural networking. "The Krell adapt to patterns," Captain Chen explained to the bewildered Conclave representative. "So we give them no patterns to adapt to. Each squad operates independently. Each soldier makes tactical decisions in the moment. Controlled chaos," Abasi added with a hint of pride. "Humanity's natural state." 48 hours into the operation, the human Marines had sustained casualties that would have broken most military units. Yet they pushed forward through the toxic miasma surrounding the primary hive structure, their determination unwavering despite exhaustion and injuries. Lieutenant Kozlov coordinated the orbital support from the tactical station, his eyes bloodshot from staring at holographic displays without rest. Firing solution locked. Precision strike on designated coordinates in 3, 2, 1. From orbit, the Dauntless released a payload that streaked through Hillen's atmosphere like an artificial meteor. The impact created a localized electromagnetic pulse that temporarily disrupted the Krell's neural network in the southern hemisphere, not enough to disable them, but sufficient to create 18 seconds of confusion among their forces. 18 seconds was all Sergeant Kelly's team needed. "Breach point secured," she reported, her voice raspy from inhaling trace amounts of Krell spores despite her filtration systems. "We're proceeding to the central chamber." The interior of the hive structure defied conventional architecture. Organic tunnels pulsed with bioluminescent fluids that flowed like blood through massive vessels. The air grew increasingly dense with psychoactive compounds designed to disorient and incapacitate intruders. "Helmets sealed," Kelly ordered as her toxin sensors redlined. "Switch to internal oxygen." Behind them, the second wave of Marines held the breach point against waves of specialized Krell defender forms. Each wave came with new adaptations: thicker armor, different sensory configurations, more efficient weapon structures. The cost in human lives was mounting. Commander Jackson monitored from the forward base camp established in the remnants of the Lilani Temple complex. All teams report similar conditions inside their target structures. The Krell are throwing everything at us. Dr. Reyes studied the incoming biological data with growing alarm. The neural disruptor needs to be deployed in the next 20 minutes. The Krell are beginning to develop countermeasures based on their encounters with our technology. In the crystalline caves beneath what had once been the Lilani capital, Elder Zephix addressed the remnants of his people. The humans fight as we cannot, with physical strength and adaptability beyond our comprehension. They suffer injuries that would shatter our crystalline forms, yet continue advancing. A younger Lilani, her crystalline structure still showing the translucent purity of youth, pressed forward. We cannot hide while they sacrifice themselves. We know the resonant frequencies of our world better than any outsider. Zephix considered this truth. The Lilani had evolved in harmony with their planet's unique crystalline composition, developing the ability to sense and manipulate the natural resonance frequencies that ran through the planetary crust like a global nervous system. It would expose our remaining population, he cautioned. We are already exposed, the younger Lilani countered. If the Krell prevail, our extinction is assured. Within the central chamber of the primary hive structure, Sergeant Kelly and her remaining team members finally reached the neural nexus, a pulsating organic mass that resembled a massive brain suspended in luminescent fluid. Sensory tendrils extended in all directions, connecting to the hive's communications network. Target acquired, Kelly reported, her voice steady despite the grotesque spectacle. Preparing to deploy the disruptor. Sudden vibration shook the chamber as specialized Krell defender forms began to emerge from concealed chambers. These new forms bore an unsettling resemblance to the Marines themselves, bipedal structures with approximations of human tactical movement patterns. They're adapting to us specifically, Martins whispered, the horror evident in his voice. Kelly unholstered her final weapon, a modified injector containing Dr. Reyes' neural disruptor compound. Then let's give them something they can't adapt to. Throughout the planet, the surviving Lilani simultaneously began to sing, a harmonic resonance that traveled through the crystalline structures of their world, amplifying with each passing second into a planet-wide symphony that disrupted the Krell's sensitive neural pathways just long enough for the human teams to complete their mission. The hum of diplomatic translators filled the conclave's grand chamber as species from across the galaxy gathered to witness what many had thought impossible. Captain Chen stood at the center of the circular platform, the formal dress uniform of the United Earth Defense Force, a stark contrast to the colorful, flowing garments of the assembled alien dignitaries. The Krell threat has been contained, but not eliminated, she stated plainly, her voice carrying through the perfect acoustics of the ancient hall. Their primary hive structures on Hillen have been neutralized, but we detected at least 3 harvester ships escaping the system during the final engagement. High Chancellor Noor Seven's mechanical appendages clicked rhythmically. Yet you achieved in days what the Conclave's threat assessment indicated would require cycles. The loss of life among your forces was significant. 172 personnel. Chen confirmed without emotion, though Commander Abesi, standing at attention behind her, noted the subtle tightening around her eyes. Each volunteered knowing the risks. Elder Zephix, supported by a sophisticated mobility frame that accommodated his damaged crystalline form, moved forward. The Lilani leader's once fractured body now displayed intricate repair work. Human medical technology combined with Lilani crystal growing techniques had created an unprecedented fusion of approaches. The human sacrifice will not be forgotten. Zephix's harmonics resonated through the chamber. From this day forward, Earth and Lilin are bound by blood and crystal. Security Director Vrex, his reptilian scales shifting through patterns of cautious blue and analytical green, approached Commander Abesi during the subsequent reception. His species, the Trescian Directorate, had served as the Conclave's primary security force for over 2,000 years. Your tactical database remains classified, I assume. Vrex's segmented pupils contracted slightly. The techniques your Marines employed against the Krell would be valuable. A basi sipped from a glass of synthesized earth bourbon, a luxury they'd brought aboard specifically for diplomatic functions. Our tactics are less about technology and more about philosophy. Director. Human military doctrine embraces flexibility, initiative at all command levels, and rapid adaptation, qualities that evolved from your violent homeworld. Vrex observed. Qualities that evolved from our diverse homeworld. A basi corrected. Earth has peaceful savannas alongside active volcanoes, gentle meadows beside raging seas. We learn to thrive in every environment, not by specializing, but by generalizing. Across the reception hall, Dr. Rice shared medical findings with an attentive group of xenobiologists. The conclave's medical director, a gelatinous being housed in an environmental suit, vibrated with excitement. Your immune systems operate on principles we've theorized but never observed in practice, the alien scientist enthused. The applications for medical science across the galaxy are profound. Captain Chen, meanwhile, received a secure communication from Earth Command. The projected hologram of Admiral Zhao appeared only visible to her specialized contact lens. The Conclave has formally requested Earth's participation in a joint defense initiative, Zhou's image reported. They're calling it Project Guardian. 50 worlds have already pledged resources. Chen maintained her diplomatic smile while processing this development. And our response? Cautious engagement, Zhao replied. We'll provide tactical advisors and training, but no technology transfers without direct oversight. As the reception continued, Texari, now formally recognized as Earth's first alien contact specialist, approached Captain Chen with a data tablet. The Conclave's historical archives have been opened to Earth researchers, she said, her slender form seeming less fragile than it had during their first meeting, including star charts for regions where Krell activity has been detected in the past. Chen accepted the tablet with appropriate diplomatic gratitude, but her thoughts were already calculating jump coordinates and fleet deployments. The Krell would regroup. They would evolve. They would return. And humanity would be ready.